welcome to Humanist Views, a program where we look at current issues from a humanist point of view. I'm Scott Lohman. On tonight's program, we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to get into my home territory. We're going to talk about being science fiction fans and nerds and its connection with humanism and atheism. So joining me tonight are Nick Glover and Tim Wick of the podcast Geeks Without God.
Hi.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So what inspired you to do a podcast and call it Geeks Without God?
It was the three of us have been working together for a couple of years. We're all comedians, and I really enjoyed working with Nick and Molly. Molly's not here, but I assume she is. I enjoyed working with Nick and Molly, and I said, well, what can we do something that we can all do together? And one thing that we all had in common is we're all atheists, and we're all geeks. And I said, well, let's talk about, and one interesting thing about Geeks, if you go to the local science fiction convention here, Convergence, a lot of other geek kind of events, you find that there are a lot of atheists.
Oh, yeah.
Mixed in with the geeks. It's a higher percentage than you would find other places. So we said, since there's a pretty good crossover between atheism and geek, it sounds like a pretty good topic for a podcast.
Yeah,
I wanted to do a podcast of some kind. We had just started doing one for another comedy project. We're in Vilification Tennis, and so we had all the equipment and all the editing and everything all set, and so it was easier to create a second one than it was to do the first one.
Yeah, that would certainly help on that. So how long have you been doing the podcast?
27 episodes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a little over a half a year.
Weekly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've discovered I've been active in the science fiction community here. I chair one of the small conventions that's held in this area, as well as doing this stuff with Humanist in Minnesota. Been going to Minicon and Convergence for a long time. And I have noticed, because I actually started thinking about getting out of religion with science fiction. Did you guys go the same way? Did you come from belief, or?
I kind of did, yeah, absolutely. Like my as a kid, my dad was exposing me to like Doctor Who and old sci-fi movies and stuff like that. And I think when escapism becomes an interest of yours, you can recognize that kind of like fictional escapism in more real parts of the world. And I don't know, it kind of clicked together.
Yeah, I don't know if I would classify that it was science fiction that made me turn away from religion, but I think that when you are used to reading stories and watching stories, I'm primarily a movie fan, and you see how stories are put together, it becomes really easy to look at the stories that religion gives you and view them as really the same sort of thing. And if all of these stories over here I know are fiction, why is this story any different? And you start to kind of deconstruct the story and you find the holes, and then you have to ask yourself whether or not that story really has any validity at all.
Yeah, and that was a factor of mine. And then also for a while I was a UFO believer. Being a science fiction guy, I had to believe in UFOs. That what did it in was research.
Yeah,
Researching that. It's like, okay, guys, if all of these if this instance is the same, why are you telling it this way and this way and this way? So then it came down to, okay, it's bodies and spacecraft, and until then, it's all a bunch of bunk.
As soon as you learn how to evaluate claims and try to figure out what's valid, what's a good source of information, what's a bunk source of information, that's a valuable skill. As soon as you figure that out, your world kind of opens up.
And I think when you talk about being a science fiction fan, you're talking about science is an operative word in that. And so as you gain more interest in science, and as you gain more interest in what science tells you, you start to question those things that don't have a scientific background. I know for myself, for a long time, even though I didn't believe in religion, I would have considered myself spiritual in the sense that I still accepted the concept of a soul, because I said, there's so much about how people work that we can't explain, i.e. the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Therefore, there must be something beyond just what we are. But as you start looking into the scientific knowledge of how the human brain works and how we continue to learn more about the human brain works, there's less and less about who we are and how we operate that isn't explainable. So as that gets stripped away and you start going, well, wait, maybe we aren't more than the sum of our parts, then you kind of that's when I moved away from believing that God existed, was when I said there is no greater than, there's just we don't know yet. And that scientific exploration that science fiction brings you to is what brought me.
The God of the gaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more we know, the smaller that territory of the unexplained is, and that, gods fall within that.
Yep, and then they keep getting tinier and tinier. Tell me about just some of the podcasts you've done, or what some of your topics have been.
What's your favorite, Nick?
Boy, I don't know. Some of the live recordings have been pretty fun.
Yeah, that's fun.
We recorded at OmegaCon.
Okay.
It's a little relaxing board games and social drinking adults only convention in Siren, Wisconsin, and we had a small audience for that, and it was kind of boisterous, and it was a good time.
But having an audience is a lot of fun.
Sure.
We just did one recently. You actually commented on it about Left Behind. And I enjoy we do some podcasts where we'll sit down and we'll watch a movie that has a religious or an atheist theme, and then we'll sit down and record a podcast about it. So Molly and Nick gave me Left Behind as a joke. So I said, well, fine, you gave me this movie, you're going to make me watch it, so you have to watch it with me. So we all sat down and watched it. So we all sat down and watched it, and then recorded a podcast about our impressions of the film, and that made, I think, watching it a lot more palatable.
It was actually fun to watch.
Yeah, because then you could be watching for the fun things, and just, the painfulness of that movie is just, it's incredible.
The DVD intro menu screen literally has a camel exploding. I don't know how to. What more could you ask for in entertainment than camel explosions?
Yeah,
you're not even into the movie. Camel explosions.
There's just a camel explosion.
Camel exploding. It's a crazy film. But you also go for more serious films like
The Contender.
Yes.
Which is an excellent film with an atheist character as the main character.
The Scopes trial.
Inherit the Wind.
Inherit the Wind. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and you look at the 1960 version, as well as bringing up the one that hooked me, which was Jason Robards and Kirk Douglas, which is a fun thing.
I had never seen it, and Molly and Tim both had, so it was fun to have someone in the group that had no idea historically I understood what it was based on, but I had never seen any of the films.
Yep.
That was fun.
Yeah, there's great books on that. You find out where the players came in and then what Miller was doing when he did that. So, which makes that, just interesting. That so you've got doing a variety of stuff on that. So are you getting neat comments from people on your approach to taking an atheist approach to science fiction?
Yeah, although the most common comment we get is that our theme song is really catchy.
We get that a lot.
It is very fun.
It's you and a friend of ours, Jeffrey Brown, wrote this super catchy theme song that we have, and we didn't luck into that. We have talented people making it for us, so we get that a lot.
But we do get, I think we get a few comments from people that they enjoy it. We really wanted to take a comedic approach to it. So, we are comedians. I think we would all say we're comedians first, and geeks second, and atheists third.
Okay.
So there are some podcasts where we don't even talk about atheism at all.
Yeah, the priority is entertainment for sure. Because if it doesn't matter. I feel like it doesn't matter how interesting or compelling the audio is. I wouldn't want to listen to myself for a half hour unless it was entertaining.
There you go. Yeah, that's always a challenge with that, and keeping within themes on that, because that's the challenging part of it is to being able to do that. So, do you have? Are you going to do more live ones at Convergence this summer?
Yeah, well, Convergence is where we did our first one.
Okay.
So Convergence this year is going to be our 1-year anniversary. I don't know. We're going to have Melissa Kersher, who was our guest on the first podcast, and right now we have a super special guest. PZ Myers is lined up to be our second guest, and I think we're going to talk. Evolution on that podcast.
That'd be awesome.
So that's going to be fun, and that'll be live, and we're excited about that. Also, there's a local skeptical convention called Skeptech coming up, April, I believe, 4th and 5th.
Yep.
I think that's right.
First weekend in April.
Yeah, and we are going to be hosting a panel of 5 people, and I'm not going to name the names or I'll get one of them wrong.
I know one of them. And
all right, say one of them. Say one of them.
Zachary Wienersmith.
Yeah, he's pretty excited.
Saturday morning breakfast cereal comic, which
Okay.
I'm gonna have a nerd moment. We're gonna see him. We're gonna sit down, and I'm like, "Oh, Nick, I'm really happy to meet you. Oh my God, I love your comic."
And
A fanboy instinct.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
very much.
yeah, it's gonna happen.
Maggie Kurth Baker, Greta Christina. So there's going to be a panel that we're going to host, and we're going to talk about skepticism and technology.
Okay. Yep.
And the confluence of that, and we're going to host that, and that's going to be a live recording. So that I don't know how that's going to go.
Well, yeah, it's always interesting when you get a good panel discussion and then a live recording at the
and
same time.
we've
It's
never
something
done that.
we haven't done. Yeah.
So we're all very nervous, I think, because we want to make sure that we do it right, since it's the first thing that happens at the conference. So
No pressure.
Yeah. Well, the other fun thing I've noticed about your podcast is just the broadness of the topics that you're taking on as well. Not just going with science fiction, but even broadening out on that, like you mentioned earlier, finding movies with atheist themes in there, or atheist characters, or even humanist themes on that as well.
We have we have friends, we know interesting people who we've talked about. We're like, who would be a great guest is our friend Bob, or Matt would be great because of this, and so we have a few people even upcoming that we haven't even recorded yet that are fun topics and not necessarily what you would consider to be like a core atheism or even core geek theme. I mean, we have an episode that we're going to be recording about alcoholism soon, which hopefully we can make funny and not terribly depressing.
Being an atheist in Alcoholics Anonymous, where they talk about God all the time.
That's part of the 12 steps, is
Yeah.
giving yourself up to a higher power.
The podcast this week was with our friend Bob, and he's a Unitarian, but he's also an atheist. So we wanted to talk to him about being an atheist, but going to church. And why did he do that, and what's that like? So we still try to be funny.
But some of those subjects that also gets more interest with people when you do that, because as many humans have discovered, if you add humor to learning, it sticks better.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's the kind of fun you can have. And are you going to go into just have you done some novels, or are you just sticking with more visual materials at this point?
We haven't done any novels yet, and maybe we should.
I know there's one book that Tim's read, that Molly's read, and I'm the anchor. I'm the one that hasn't read it yet.
Oh, that's the Losing My Religion book?
Losing My Religion, right. I'm kind of a slow reader when it's not a comic book. I've got dyslexia. It slows me down a little bit, and so I'll get to it. We'll make it happen sooner or later.
I tell you what, though, you guys, they just lent me Preacher, which is a series of comics.
Yes.
That we definitely ought to do an episode on that once I work my way through those.
Garth Ennis, Vertigo Comics.
And you guys are also ripe for Dune.
Oh,
Dune.
Yeah. I love Dune.
With the religion on that, and you can look at the different versions. There's the movie, and then there was the miniseries on Sci-Fi Channel to throw in there as well.
There's the weird unreleased Salvador Dali stuff too, and
that's
super cool.
Get a whole new universe when you're going into that part of it. So.
Yeah, Dune would be a good topic.
Yeah.
All right, somebody make a note.
Yeah. I can send you an email.
There we go. There we go.
That'll work in this thing. So, where do you hope, doing performance? Where do you hope to take the podcast in the future, or just keep having
everywhere?
Fun with it? Yep.
I'd love to get to the point where we can have guests or have the access to guests that I would be almost embarrassed or nervous to meet, like Neil deGrasse Tyson or like Bill Nye or something like that, where it would be, or even like Penn Jillette. That'd be great. Where we could have people like that purely for the selfish reason of me being able to meet them and hang out and talk to them. I'm sure it'd be entertaining and make for a great podcast, but I'd get to meet them.
Yep, exactly.
And that is the main reason. We'd love to, like The Amazing Meeting. It would be great to be able to go and record some podcasts there and do a live one at that. Dragon Con has a really active skeptical track.
Yep.
That would be a great convention to get to someday and do a live recording there. We're looking at other skeptical conferences. It is so much more fun to record in front of a live audience. So the opportunities to do that don't always present themselves, but that's definitely something we'd love to do more of.
Well, and even beyond like professional podcasting. This winter we did a fundraiser for Camp Quest, Minnesota.
Okay.
And I mean, I'd love to be able to use any attention we get to help out, nonprofit organizations and organizations that help represent atheists and geeks and do good in those communities. For sure. I mean, what's the point of having any sort of clout, even if it's tiny little podcast clout, if you can't do something good with it?
Yeah, Camp Quest is an amazing thing.
It is.
I teach there each year, and I actually teach using science fiction. So, when you mentioned using story and how that's there, so I will show that, and then I give them discussion questions. So they have to watch, and then they have to work. So
that's good.
Yeah, so it's great fun in using that because, storytelling for us humans goes way back to the fire.
Right.
In terms of one of the early things that we used to teach each other.
It's communicating ideas and entertaining and
Yeah, so that's the great fun there. I also like that you, when we were talking about the science part earlier, that you want to get in good skeptical approaches to it and the way of assessing things and using the scientific method to do that as well.
Yeah, we've had a few scientists on the podcast. I think we need to have more. But the great thing, the thing that's super exciting is, we have a lot of people who have told us they're really anxious to be guests on our podcast. We have no shortage of guests lined up, and it actually is kind of frustrating sometimes to figure out who we're going to get in there next. And that's been really kind of surprising.
It's flattering as heck.
Yeah, when we started, we were like, well, it'll probably be like we'll have a guest every month or every other month. And it's reached the point where it's literally half of our podcasts are with guests and half are without. And we've had such a great cross-section. We've had comedians who are also atheists. And interestingly enough, when we talk about the crossover between geeks and atheists and skeptics, comedians, there's a tremendous crossover between comedians and atheists. So that's been exciting that we've been able to bring comedians, we've had scientists, we've had representatives from Camp Quest. It's just great that so many different people want to be on the podcast, and that we have to kind of tell so many people, just wait, we want to get to you, just give us a little while.
Yeah, get to you down the line on that part. So when you look at just the combination it's just, I've always found the overlap between the science fiction community and the atheist community, as you mentioned, that our percentages are way up in that. And I noticed that early on because it was one of the first places that I felt really comfortable was in the science fiction community.
Sometimes I wonder if it's not the like I said, like the escapism as entertainment or recognizing fiction because you're into fiction. Sometimes I wonder if it's not like the nerd kind of know-it-all thing that we do sometimes, where it's like, you expect me to believe that whatever, and Superman flight and his laser vision and issue whatever of Action Comics, that whole like nerdy attention to detail, minutia thing. Like, I wonder if that's what does it sometimes.
Yeah, and I also think because science fiction fandom and geekdom was kind of an outcast sort of thing, it's much more mainstream now. If Return of the King can win Best Picture and make $300 billion worldwide, or however much it made, it's really a lot more okay to be a geek than it was when we were young. But I think that the fact that most people that come to like a science fiction convention and geekdom come to it from an outcast perspective. Well, as an atheist, we're already outcasts. There's already so many people in society that don't want us to be out loud about the fact that we don't believe in God. And at a science fiction convention, you can totally be upfront about that. Nobody's going to look at, even if they do believe in God, even if they're a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, even if they absolutely believe in God, they don't bat an eye, they don't look at you askance when you say you're an atheist, because there is that shared experience of being an outcast already. And I think that's why you find more atheists in that community, because it's easier to be an atheist in that community. than it is in the.
So many other common interests too. It's like, do you believe in God? No. Do you? Yes. Do you like Firefly? Me too. like that sort of thing. I mean, when you have so much else to talk about, it doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, and there's the passion about other things. I had a great encounter with Robert Price, who is New Testament expert, but he also goes to church because he enjoys the ceremony in that.
Sure.
And he and I are friendly and nerdy, and we were talking about things. And while I was chatting with him, it was after a debate that he had with a Christian. I forget the exact debate, but he was just clutching his Bible really tight and was talked about the debate. And then we switched gears to talk about Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and he just went like that. It was like, how could you switch gears and talk to things like that? It just totally flabbergasted him.
It's stuff you're passionate about.
Yep.
So, yeah. You know, and the thing is, I would much rather argue with somebody about who was the best James Bond than argue about whether or not God exists, because I have nothing to add to the conversation that will convince them, and they have nothing to add to the conversation that will convince me. But I'm pretty sure I can convince somebody that Timothy Dalton wasn't as bad as they think he was. So,
yeah, but you're not going to convince me.
I didn't say I was
James Bond.
I didn't say favorite. I didn't say. Oh my God! You know, so that's where it starts.
Yeah,
All
exactly. Well, that's the fun part, because I've been in many a late night discussion at a convention on those sort of things, where you get into the minutia of that stuff. But you also find people who share your delight in getting into the minutia.
Yeah,
off into the weeds.
Nerd rage arguments. They're fun. It's great to get worked up about it. If you don't get worked up about it, you don't care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, kind of the fun that when those of us who you guys watch The Big Bang Theory, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So you notice that whoever they've got consulting for their nerd jokes knows us extremely well.
There's some pretty detailed stuff. There's some issue number drops
There's
for like references.
There's
and
a lot of
stuff.
nerd rage involved in Big Bang Theory too,
There
because
is
there
quite
are
a
a lot of geeks who feel like Big Bang Theory is just making fun of geeks.
Nerd
rather,
face.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that, but it is definitely a nerd rage issue.
Someone said that show King of the Nerds, the reality show. It's like in Big Bang Theory, I'm the punchline. In King of the Nerds, I'm what you need to be to win. I am the what you're aiming for. But in Big Bang Theory, sometimes I feel like I'm the punchline.
Yeah.
I understand that. I still watch. It's still entertaining.
Yeah.
I guess as a comedian, I'm okay being the punchline because to me, everything is a punchline.
Sure. Got to have that kind of fun.
Yeah.
But then there's also the great documentary called Triumph of the Nerds, in which case it talks about the development of the PC.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, which is great fun, looking at the fact that a lot of nerds are early adapters when it comes to the technology thing. And being
Nerds rule the world right now. I mean,
Yes.
I think that's really important. That when you think, Bill Gates is what, the second richest man in America right now?
Used to be the first.
Used to be the first. Steve Jobs
Right.
was maybe some of their top 10. But
Sure.
But nerds have a lot of money and a lot of power. And because of the way our technology has advanced, because of the way our world works now, nobody can do what they do without nerds. And that's kind of interesting. Talking to a few friends who have come to Convergence, who have come from Hollywood, and they talk about how the nerds are taking over in Hollywood. And that's why you see a lot more good geek properties being made into films, is because the people who are making films are geeks, and they want to see these movies, and they now have the power to make them. So, nerd power.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure.
Yeah, and make them very well too. And especially since my son shares some interests with me, but occasionally I have to take him back to the old black and white Doctor Who's. Shows we're trying to explain some of the reference to that, and he looks at me like I'm making him eat the bad vegetables. he looks at the old special effects and the black and white and the pacing, and he's going, oh.
I might borrow that. Old black and white back Doctor Who is eating your vegetables for nerds. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to do that so that you appreciate the stuff that's going on.
It builds character.
Yeah, but it also puts up on what we put up for years. It's like, this is good, but could they have just spent a wee bit more on the special effects?
Sure. Or Star Trek, the original series.
Yep.
Shaking around and all the blinking panels and stuff.
And yet, without Star Trek, the original series, how much would not exist?
Yes.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm not even just talking about Star Trek, but think about the fact that show even if it wasn't successful, super successful in its initial run, but the way it generated a fandom, honestly, I don't know if Star Wars fandom would exist the way it does now had Star Trek fandom not basically paved the way and created a template. And I'm no expert, so somebody's going to write in and say, well, actually, the way that Star Wars fan, and that's fine. That's fine. That's what we nerds do, and I'm totally behind that. But
we correct each other on those things.
But I mean, I think there are nerd touch points, nerd or geek touch points. I don't care which one you want to call it. And Star Trek, the original series, is definitely one of those touch points. And Star Wars is a touch point where you really see nerd culture change in a really dramatic way.
Oh yeah.
And you know, Lord of the Rings, I think, was a cultural touch point that really
Firefly.
changed.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Firefly was. I mean,
and those sort of things. But you know, what's really neat with as far as I'm a humanist that comes from Star Trek, because people can't make out my tie, but that's what's there, is that Roddenberry was bringing the philosophy of humanism into network television on that, and just sneaking it past, especially in when we got to the next gen. It's like full front. He's just basically laying it out, and that's his operating philosophy in there. Because in the original series, he fought the network on putting a chaplain on board. They had a chapel, but he said no, there won't be a chaplain. So just
in
one of the
space, no one can hear you pray.
Yeah, there you go. and then they got to run into the godlike characters and have a lot of fun. And in the animated series, having Kirk say to in the episode "How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth," saying to the powerful being who had presented himself as Cuckoo Khan, "Sorry, we don't need you anymore. We've grown up."
Yeah. There are a lot of godlike characters. We have an episode coming up where we talk to a friend of ours who's a big Doctor Who expert about humanism and atheism in Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah.
So Star Trek, we touch on Star Trek because Star Trek definitely has a humanist perspective where, much like Doctor Who, there's always an explanation that's not metaphysical.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if there is psychic power of some sort, that psychic power is explained in a way that's far more scientific than metaphysical.
It's not just space magic. There's a pseudo-scientific reason behind it. And it's fiction, but
there's
that world, it's
techno-babble,
science.
but there's still techno.
And it's basing it on something with a wee bit of a realistic base, as opposed to just being an all-powerful, supreme being that shows up and helps when he wants to and not when he doesn't want to. So pretty much we're getting down to the end of the program. So what are just some things that you would go, if somebody who's going, ooh, how do I learn to speak this language better? Where would you start people, going from your podcast to just dive into the crazy nerdy world of science fiction?
To dive into the crazy nerdy world, the stuff that's really accessible. To me, the Lord of the Rings movies are a great starting point. I think any of the Marvel superhero movies that have been coming out, from a film perspective, and I'm a film guy, so that's what I'm going to start with. Those are really good starting points. What comics would you suggest?
Just pick up an Avengers comic. If you want to read Marvel comics, you want to know what's going on in that world, you pick up an Avengers comic, you got a pretty good idea what's happening. I feel like, if you're a DC person, just read Superman, read Green Lantern.
You can start picking up the language that way.
Yeah.
And those also have
books. For books, I will say, especially from a humanist perspective, I would go for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy trilogy. Very accessible, very funny. Anybody you can slide right into the nerd realm
and pick up some stuff there. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been great to have you.
Thanks for having us. It was a lot of fun.
You're welcome. And for more information on us, the Humanists of Minnesota, you can go to our website at humanistofmn.org and let us know what you think of this program. Send us an email or give us or a letter. We'd like to hear from you on this program and what you'd like to see us cover in the future. Thank you for joining me on this edition of Humanist Views. I'm Scott Lohman. Good night.